Watch this.
The state attorney general is supposed to be the most powerful lawyer in Idaho. What if we told you his power was limited when it comes to investigative reach? That could be about to change.
Here is a case where if you give everybody everything they want in the bill, you will end up with no viable bill at all.
Nobody's in favor of being faked out by AI, but some lawmakers weren't in favor of a bill meant to prevent that because it wasn't really strong enough. Ours is a part-time legislature, meaning most lawmakers have other full-time jobs. So you can understand wanting to spend less time in session. Moving too fast to think through bills, though? Not a good idea, according to one area think tank. So who has the authority to investigate elected officials in Idaho? A county prosecutor looking into a county commissioner's possible criminal conduct, for example, might be considered a conflict of interest, which is why Idaho law allows the Office of the Attorney General to intervene and handle that investigation. But that's about as far down the ladder as the AG's office goes. City elected officials are out of the state attorney's purview. Well, there's a new bill being introduced that looks to change that. But there are two lines in that bill that raised a few eyebrows in terms of investigating open meeting laws. Joe Paris takes a look.
Sometimes in the law, there can be inconsistency, or maybe even a gap.
It's unfair that the Attorney General has authority to investigate elected officials who are county elected, but not city elected.
Representative Bruce Skog realized that gap could create some conflict of interest issues at the local level. So he drafted House Bill 390. It expands a specific power of the Attorney General.
We get calls all the time about issues with city elected officials and other people, and we always have to explain we don't have the authority to do that.
Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador explains that a few years ago, the legislature gave the AG's office power to look into illegal activity at the county level, but it didn't extend to the city level. As it stands, county prosecutors investigate the city level, but that can get tricky for practical reasons.
These cases are hard, and when you're a local prosecutor, you don't always want to be investigating people that you work with. You don't want to investigate, the city officials that maybe you're working with or the county officials that you're working with. So it's better for the Office of Attorney General to be doing that.
Because we know the city and county officials, sometimes they're working in the same building or next door.
Correct, yes.
That's uncomfortable for somebody to blow a whistle when there's something inappropriate. When they're working with that fellow all the time, or woman who's a prosecutor, then there's a tendency to not investigate.
So what do county prosecutors think? If passed, the law would assign their current jurisdiction to the AG. I reached out to some county prosecutors, including Grant Lobes. He's a Twin Falls prosecutor and a board member of the Idaho Prosecuting Attorneys Association. Lobes tells me that on this specific legislation, he has no objection. Like Skog and Labrador, he has a similar concern with the current law. He writes to me, quote, "Because of the inherent conflicts of interest that often arise when local prosecutors are asked to investigate and prosecute local officials whom they may work with and know, there is always the potential implication by one party or another that the local prosecutor is being too hard or too soft on an official they know." There has been chatter also about two lines in the legislation that have been crossed out in Idaho code, dealing with investigations into open meeting laws. A sensitive topic, but Labrador explains this is a cleanup of code.
When this law was initially drafted for county elected officials, it said that we would investigate civil and criminal activity. But there was an exception for not investigating open meetings law violations at the county level. Apparently, a couple of years ago, they withdrew the section that said that this was a civil investigation also, and it's only criminal investigation. So that language was just not necessary anymore because open meetings law violations are civil, they're not criminal.
The proposed law would also open the door for corrective action instead of jail and fines at the city level, like it currently has with the county elected officials. And an example I can talk to you about right now, Brian, is the Attorney General saying there's a situation that, we're looking into it. It appears that it was a genuine mistake that was made. In committee this week, the very specific example was also given that there was a county level elected official that had a county credit card and a personal credit card. They looked visually very the same. So one was accidentally used. There's a full investigation into it. Now this law, if passed down to the city level, you wouldn't have to get someone in legal trouble. There could just be corrective action instead say, hey, separate your cards.
Okay, so the other side of this, so aren't there enough county prosecutors out there to handle a city investigation?
Right, and there are. I don't think this is a manpower issue. This is strictly, counties and cities. They oftentimes work closely together,
okay,
and especially in rural Idaho. So you'll have times where two people know each other off the clock. At work, it could be kind of awkward trying to get them to investigate each other.
All right, we'll see what happens with this one. All right, thanks, Joe.
What a bunch of malarkey. We know the value of voting Democratic when our votes count. It's important that you save your vote for the November election.
Okay, so while that was a good use of President Biden's favorite word, that would be malarkey, the audio is just that, malarkey. Audio was sent out to New Hampshire voters telling them to skip the Republican primary. Maybe you heard about this happening, but the audio wasn't real. And while that happened on the other side of the country, there are Idaho lawmakers who want to prevent the possibility of that same thing happening here in Idaho. And we've talked about this before, right, Andrew, about this bill that there's a possibility of trying to get or at least rein in some of this AI when it comes to political ads and what you know as real versus what is obviously a deep fake.
Yeah, and it seems that something that any politician would be support of, right? The last thing they want is an ad coming out that has them saying something that they didn't say, but it was actually a pretty tight margin today, 8-5 to send House Bill 426 to the floor. Now, it directly confronts these kinds of audio recordings and even videos, and that tight line is because it's kind of a tight line to walk. Some lawmakers wanted to push to make that bill stronger in what it does, but banning that could potentially be banning free speech. So in the same name of protecting Idaho's elections, the bill wants electioneering fakes to be clearly labeled and face legal consequences if not. Maintenance crews outside the Idaho State House are left picking up the scraps from a fleeting storm. And the lawmakers on the inside,
welcome to House State Affairs.
They aren't eager to do the same in the face of a fast-coming election season.
Let's get this done.
Deep fakes, imitations, and deceiving AI election ads. Right now, it's open season with no regulations and no rules.
Don't let perfect get in the way of good.
It's where these sponsors know
the attorneys in the room.
It's a fine line to walk.
We're in very delicate First Amendment territory, and it has to be really quite narrowly confined.
And banning this speech could be a step too far. Representative Ilana Rebel co-sponsors the bill.
This is really something that's come on the scene really in the last year. So I fully expect that we will see this deployed against us if we don't act now.
It requires AI-generated election ads within state-defined electioneering windows to be clearly labeled. This regulates both fake audio and fake video imitating a candidate.
We drafted this bill very carefully to have something that we think is pretty watertight and that will survive constitutional challenges. Similar language has been vetted in about 23 other states.
Public testimony unanimously supported the bill.
Typically, deep fakes are used with the intent to deceive and manipulate.
And was best described as self-aware.
It turns out that I can be easily fooled by manipulated photos.
And the bill's most notably co-sponsored by big names on opposite ends of the aisle.
You've heard from your two legislative attorneys who are often at odds. We want this bill.
But the committee contends.
Are there questions?
It doesn't go far enough.
So in an off-election year, they can pretty well say and do whatever they want.
A looser definition of what a candidate is, frankly. Someone who's run in the past, someone who could potentially be running.
Make sure that we are covering as many people as possible.
But Rebel rebuttals, the more land they try to cover, the more legal challenges it face too.
And I am concerned that some of the proposed changes could sink the whole ship.
Though behind a tight margin, it stayed afloat.
Motion passes 8-5. Committee, that completes our work for today. We'll stand adjourned.
They really are not a rubber stamp committee, and I appreciate that. So I feel good about the bill going forward. It's a step in the right direction. It's not as big a step as some would like to take, but we have to protect our freedom of speech at the same time.
There may be scraps left behind to later bolster the bill. But with a storm on the way, sponsors say it's a small step to maintain what we already have.
Fundamentally, this is about protecting the public and protecting election integrity.
The bill labels this type of fake and manipulated content as synthetic media, and for audio only, it has to be an easily understandable disclaimer spoken at a normal speed, and it must say that this audio was fake and impersonated someone. As for TV, print, or a still image, you could see a written font that is prominent and easy to read. must say that the video or picture is fake and someone was impersonated. The electioneering window, Brian, is 60 days for a general election. For a primary or midterm, that would be 30 days. And so this would only pertain to election ads that are in that window of time because, again, these sponsors are afraid you go outside of that window, well, then it's not as narrowly tailored. Maybe that's a First Amendment problem again.
The question I have then is similar to what Chairman Crane had, was like, okay, so outside that window, you could put out whatever you want, but then could that be used to come back and say, see what he said then?
Representative Young asked that, and she said, so if it comes up within this time frame, is it then under this law? They said yes,
Okay.
they believe it would be.
Not just created, but used during
Exactly.
that. Okay.
So you'd have to change it and label it then.
All right. We'll see what happens with that one as well. Thank you very much, Andrew. Well, if it seems like lawmakers are trying to streamline the session, speed it up a bit this year, you may have noticed the same things that others have. We've talked about the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee and how they're trying to cut down on their 3-hour budget meetings. But what if the timeline for public testimony is too tight? Is 24 or 48 hours enough notice for people to say their piece on policy? Not according to the Mountain States Policy Center, who wants to see more time allowed for the citizens to get involved in Idaho's citizen legislature.
I suspect that a lot of people haven't even had an opportunity to read this bill and digest it.
You may have heard it at the end of Wednesday's House State Affairs hearing on House Bill 415.
In this case, it seems like we're just rushing through this.
When Representative John Gannon,
especially when we still have people that want to testify,
wanted to extend the time allowed for public testimony, saying some people haven't had enough time to take their shot on a bill that would allow teachers to conceal carry on campus. However, Chairman Brent Crane,
So it was introduced actually on Monday.
Described his timeline like this.
We're Wednesday today, so that's 48 hours from the time we introduced the bill to the time you had a hearing on the bill.
48 hours, according to Chairman Crane, seems like plenty of time for public notice. And it's how he's always tried to do it.
You've sat on this committee for a number of years now. It's about 48 hours, typically, from the time that a bill is introduced that it can be brought before a committee for a hearing.
But there are others,
no problem,
who think it should be done differently.
We can all be a little more worry-free if we support the rule of 3.
This is what we call the rule of 3, and it's pretty simple, and it just gives citizens more of an opportunity to be involved in the process.
The rule of 3, according to the Mountain States Policy Center, would be to give people at least 3 days' notice of a committee hearing.
And that just is a fair way, we feel like, to give citizens the opportunity to travel to Boise if they need to do that, or to make plans to testify before a legislative committee. It's really difficult for someone, if they're, let's say, in North Idaho or Idaho Falls or wherever they might be, to change their schedule on a whim and to travel to Boise if there's really a an important issue that they care about.
More witnesses.
Cargill points to what happened last week.
Trevor Chadwick, are you in the room?
With House Bill 406.
The fentanyl mandatory minimums bill that came up, and it was introduced on a Wednesday, printed for public consumption and review on a Thursday, and then they held a public hearing on a Friday. I mean, look, the way the system is set up right now, it works pretty well for lobbyists or activists who are right next to the Capitol, and they can go from room to room and testify, but it really shuts out the average citizen if you're going to do these things, especially so early in session when we've got so much time left in the legislative session.
So you may be wondering about Idaho's open meeting law, which requires a 48-hour agenda notification.
What happens is the legislature is exempt from that. And so the legislature can do 24 hours, it could do 48 hours, it could do 5 days if it really wanted to. And so what we're suggesting is that the legislature change its own rules to just say, you know what, we're going to give it a 3-day period to hold a public hearing. And that way, everyone, whether it be a lobbyist, an activist, the legislator, it's him or herself, can actually read through the bill and understand it.
The chair is going to take a moment here to speak to an issue that has been brought up today that I think needs addressed.
Again, on Wednesday.
And that's the speed at which legislation moves through this body.
Chairman Crane felt the need for further explanation.
However, we are a part-time legislature. We are elected to come here in about 90 days and get work done.
I can appreciate that, but at the same time, that's not necessarily a good way to go about getting the public involved.
If it gets introduced on a Monday, it'll probably get heard on a Wednesday or Thursday.
They are a citizen legislature, and I would suggest to you that also means, Brian, making sure that you're listening to your fellow citizens and giving them the opportunity to participate and have meaningful participation.
So just to make it loud and clear to everybody listening in the state of Idaho, we're going to continue to move at the speed of business in here, and we'll continue to do so. So with that, we stand adjourned.
I know you're probably thinking as well, what about Zoom, like as we spoke to Chris Cargill today? Well, he says even that can be kind of tough to do for people who don't pay attention to what's happening in the legislature on the hourly basis. So things change overnight sometimes with those agendas. We tried to reach out to Representative Crane, chair of the House State Affairs Committee, to ask him about considering lengthening the time between when a bill is introduced and when it is given a public hearing. We've yet to hear back, but that 48-hour timeline seems to be pretty consistent across many of the committees, even with the bills expected to attract the most attention, like House Bill 384, the harmful materials in the library bill, printed on Wednesday, public hearing the following Monday. House Bill 415, the arming teachers bill, printed on Monday, heard just yesterday. So should testimony on legislation be given at least a 72-hour notice? We'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
I am thrilled to report that we finally got some sunshine today, especially in those valley locations where we've continuously been shrouded in the fog at times throughout the day. But I just want to let you know we may see limited sunshine as we go into tonight and into tomorrow. Well, obviously tonight because the sun is setting, but tomorrow as well, because we have chances of seeing the fog redevelop at times. And also Friday in the later evening, we're expecting more moisture to work its way in. And then Saturday to Sunday, we'll be looking at a rain-snow mix for even the mountain area. So very warm air will be moving in on the way. But first, let's talk about the fog. Views like this are what has been happening in Ontario for about 3 days now. For 3 days, the fog has been really consistent off and on. And so because of that, visibility has been really limited at times. So areas like Nampa, Caldwell, you can expect some views like that, if not tonight, at least tomorrow morning. So with the cooler air that's moved through, with the system that just passed through, we expect a very chilly morning tomorrow, so a little bit colder than we have seen. Then after the cold air passes, we expect another system to move through with a warm front. So you can see as that front lifts to the north, we will continue to see the warm air start to move in, and that will bring some light moisture for us. So rain showers in valley locations, even a rain-snow mix for some mountains, and only snow at the highest elevations. So when we're looking at what we're expecting this weekend, you can see even the low temperature is expected to be above freezing for some areas on Saturday. You can see the highs continue to be above freezing. Sunday we get back below freezing, so that will stop some melting. But through the weekend, I think we could see a good amount of melting with the warm air that will continue to be moving through the area. So as for the mountains, just know that more mild conditions will be on the way for us and a more limited snow.
Thomas Creech's body count could go up after a decades-old cold case from California listed him as a suspect. We have more details on that and some other 208 tidbits in today's 411. Here's Brenda Rodriguez.
Thomas Creech, the man convicted in 3 murders in Idaho in the 1970s and 80s, is now a suspect in the 70s cold case murder in California. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department says Daniel Walker was shot multiple times along the side of Interstate 40 on October 1st, 1974. Last November, a team picked the case back up and yesterday identified Creech as a suspect in the murder. Creech is currently on death row. Last week, he had a clemency hearing asking his sentence to be changed to life in prison. Faces of Hope Meridian is now open. The new service center opened today on South Eagle Road. It offers counseling, case management, and legal support for crisis victims of abuse. Services are available Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 p.m., but you can still use the blue light phone outside the office for after-hour emergencies. One note, forensic exams will only be at the Ada County Victims Center on 6th Street in downtown Boise. Governor Little is defending Idaho's claims to potatoes after Oregon changed their state vegetable to the potato last year. Little wanted to make sure that Utah didn't get the same idea. So he sent out the big Idaho potato truck to defend the title. It came with a donation to the Utah Food Bank. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said that as much as we love Idaho potatoes, the Spanish tweet onion isn't changing as their state vegetable anytime soon. Thank goodness that worked. And speaking of spuds, Idaho's Secretary of State Phil McGrain sent Lieutenant Governor of Utah, Deidre Henderson, a potatogram this week. Yep, you heard us right. You can send potatoes to your friends. And this one said, quote, "Thanks for being the best Spudsy. I hope I didn't mash this one up too bad. I owe you one, Phil." Henderson got deep into the potato puns, tweeting, "Very tactful of my spud Phil McGrain to send a potatogram. It was a great start to my day." And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Brenda Rodriguez.
A minute and a half here. Time to get some of your comments, like this one about the AI legislation against ads or having it used in political ads. This one from David in Boise County. Artificial intelligence might be preferable to the intelligence of the ruling legislators in the last few sessions. That's a pretty good one. What does it matter? 48 or 72-hour notice so they could ignore the input and do whatever they want anyway, says Leon in Meridian. That's happened quite a few times. Brian, in regards to the 72-hour notice for committee hearings, I would like to see a comparison for other states. How much time do they give? Well, we know that Washington has a 5-day rule. Montana is 3, Wyoming just 1 day. So there's a bit of a comparison there. No wonder Chairman Crane won't allow more time for the public to read bills. He said he doesn't read them himself. Jack remembers that. We did that story about him saying, yeah, he doesn't read the bills until it comes to before him in the committee. That way he can ask questions. He says he's more conceptual that way, wants to know more about the idea instead of the letter of the bill. When do you need those comments on the public hearing timeline by, says Dan in Garden City? How about 24 hours from now? Let's put that one on there, right? 3 days might be a little long for us. 24 hours. Speaking of that, we'll see you tomorrow.